going on, guys? Welcome back to another Game Time Discussions. I'm Emery Cuzzy. I'm sitting here with Cameron Selby, and we're going to be doing Thursday Night Football, Broncos at Chargers. We've already seen this game once this year. The over-under is 42, and the Chargers are a 3-point favorite. That implies that the Chargers have 22.5 points and Denver at 19.5. I actually think this slate's a lot of fun. I think that there's, some pretty serious options at the top that you're going to want to get to, and then trying to figure out how to make your line make the most sense after that. I think 3 out of 4 is going to be played in every line between Bo Nix, Justin Herbert, Cortland Sutton, and Ladd McConkey. But 4 out of 4 is still an option, so I want to see what you have to do.
Well,
what you think?
The most beautiful slates are the ones that it's really uncomfortable except for the top options, and basically everybody below 9,000 just you don't feel good about it.
Right.
We'll go through the prices and just why we feel the way we do. There's multiple guys that I had as pure fades as I looked at these prices and stuff just because of that. But there's nobody other than the top 4, which we're talking about the wide receiver ones for each team, and then both quarterbacks that you can confidently say that this is the game where they're going to pop off, where they've been popping off consistently, and that's why it's a value. Really, there's a couple values if-then statements that we will talk about, but that's just kind of the beauty of this slate. So it's really fun, and we should just jump right into it.
Yeah, looking at the receivers for the Denver Broncos side of the game, because Denver is the visitor. Cortland Sutton has to be talked about first, of course. He has been the best, but there is actually a lot of really interesting options after that, because you have Marvin Mims, who's $4,400, $4,000 Vele, and Troy Franklin at 3,000 are the main guys that I'm going to be pulling up. All receivers. We'll talk about tight ends here in a second. Of course, you can put Troutman in there if you wanted to. But looking at this, of course, Cortland Sutton's number one. You can tell by the game log, he is the favorite, averaging 9 targets in the last 5 games, touchdowns 4 out of those 5. He's just been the best player on the team, receiving wise, and Bo Nix and him have figured it out. So he's your first option basically on this team.
Well, yeah, he is the first A, B, and C of this team. The funny thing is, even though we say that, we did a showdown on their most previous Thursday night game against the against the New Orleans Saints, and we were like, this is the guy we're fading, and it was because of weird pricing where I think he was 11-6 or 11-4, and so we had
10-8.
10-8, okay.
10-8, yeah.
So we had to decide between, I think Kamara was the
he was, yeah.
But basically we decided we were picking one or the other, and we were going to just fade the other one entirely, and he went 0 for 0 for 0, and it was a weird game. But then since then, 11 targets, 10 targets, 9 targets, 8 targets, one of the most random blurbs of the year, because he's, for the most part, had his best year in a few years since he previously, before he tore his ACL when he had a Pro Bowl season,
right,
way back when. So yeah, he's been very steady, excellent. Definitely really need to be considering him heavily. Last time they did play the Chargers, I think that it was week 4 if you want to go to his game log just as a compare, or week 6.
Yeah.
He had 4 for 53, modest production, but he scored a touchdown, so it's worth mentioning. He had a really solid outing.
Yeah, if you do go with him, you want something around this 100-yard game, touchdown, catching some of these balls. He did go 3 for 9. 6 of those didn't get to him. I don't know if they were drops or not, but so Cortland Sutton is number 1. And then behind him, I don't know necessarily who's 2A, or 2 in this offense.
It's all sparingly.
So.
Devon Vele, according to RotoWire, was the highest valued cheap guy last week. He had 1 target. He didn't catch it. But previously, before that, he had 3 straight very solid games.
Mm-hmm.
The last showdown slate we had with them, where they played the Cleveland Browns, my cheap guy was going to Vele. Like I said, he had a 9 target game, but he had 66, 80 yards. He had a 4 for 39 there with the score. So he's been steady, but also you've seen 2 straight duds. So the risk is baked in with the price, because he's all the way down at 4,000.
Right.
Everybody but Cortland Sutton for the Broncos receiving core is 4,000 and below, so really affordable, but it's hard to have confidence. But as I was saying, Marvin Mims was my cheap guy against the Browns, because I believe he was like 2.8 or something like that, and it was mainly because he was like clearly the wide receiver 3B in terms of snap share, but when he's in, they were the bubble screens and the routes, and lo and behold, he had a 93-yard touchdown. But ended up not working out, because basically you needed everything Cleveland in that to profit, and that's not what I ended up doing. But just showing his upside, because he is a big play guy. But you also had Troy Franklin, who's had some big games. He had a 100-yard game earlier in the season, a couple of 5-target games in there. He scored a touchdown. And then there was one game where he had 2 drop touchdowns.
Yes.
So, again, sporadic, but all over the place. And then also one more guy just worth mentioning is Lil Jordan Humphrey. He was injured. Or no, he was not injured. I was thinking of Josh Reynolds. But Lil Jordan Humphrey just kind of has been, fighting with the wide receiver 4 in terms of snaps. But, basically every single game since week 6, he's had at least 21 snaps. He's only $1,000. Again, 1 target last week, 0 catches, no targets the week before. But the previous 3, he had at least 3 targets in 3 straight games. He's showing as the highest value on RotoWire. Being $1,000, he opens up a lot. Again, don't have a ton of confidence, but you have to point out every single one of these guys because they're all going to be on the field.
Yeah, looking at this grouping, Vele actually on RotoWire right now. For anybody over $1,000, normally when you're 1,000 or below, you get a very big bump in value because, like you said, Lil Jordan Humphrey is the highest value. He is $1,000, and he's only projected for 4.5 points. But with Vele is 2.5 as the highest value above $1,000. So I don't know. It's a very interesting slate, like I said, because of the fact that you want to go up to Courtland Sutton and then trying to figure out a way to get maybe one more of these guys, finding someone you're comfortable with, finding the way to get Bo Nix also with them, and then playing all the Chargers, because I'm not necessarily picking Denver to win this game. So I kind of want the point scorers, and they might be on the other side. This is a very much so a raw points type of slate, in my opinion. Noticing guys like down here at the bottom, well, I might just say shove all 4 of the top guys in and then try to get all the value, get guys that are going to catch the ball maybe once or twice at the bottom.
Right. Yeah. And then also from the Denver side, we have to just mention the annoying running game. Obviously, it's a 3-headed monster, just unproductive, inconsistent usage, all that stuff. But Javonte Williams, the highest price guy because he's getting the most snaps, but he's just done nothing with it for the last month plus. Since the previous Thursday night game where we had him as a stand and he had 2 touchdowns and it was awesome. But then since then, he's gone over 10 points 2 times.
Twice, yeah.
But he's had 3 games in that same span less than 5 points.
Right.
And a lot of, 1 yard, minus 2 yards, 1 yard as rushing upside. And it's just like, you can't pay 76 for that. But then also you got to bring up that Jaleel McLaughlin missed time, or he left the game, and then he was a non-participant on Monday. So it sounded like he was participant through a walkthrough or a limited session today. So
good.
I guess he would project to play, and that would just make me feel better about fading the position entirely, just because none of these guys are really doing anything consistently. They're all eating into each other's workloads, and they're all baked up in price. Like, one of them was expected to be out, which is apparently not the case. So I just don't want anything to do with this this trio. And then Audric Estime, he was priced up because of Jaleel's injury, 5,600. Obviously, if they're all playing, he's had no more than 6 opportunities in the last 3 games, and again, all of these games below 6 points, you can't spend on that.
Yeah, the percentages kind of show that Javonte is the main guy, but he's just not getting the ball even when he's in. He's getting 50% of the snaps. But it doesn't mean anything in this situation. I did want to pull up just for talking purposes. On average right now, per game, 32.9 rushing yards for Javonte, 27.7 for Jaleel McLaughlin, and 20.4 for Audric Estime. None of that is going to help you take down a tournament or do anything like that. So I'm just going to, like you said, try to fade this and hope that they don't fall in the end zone, and that doesn't hurt us in that way. So.
Yeah, and I mean, none of them have rushing props, obviously, because of the injury, but all of them would be less than 35 rushing yards.
Yeah.
And so if you just want to dart throw, cool, but that's what Vegas thinks of this trio. And so if you have to spend up for any of those guys, again, if they were in the receiver range where it's the same kind of uncertainty, but they're all cheap, sure, why not? But because they're not, I'd rather just take the chance on one of these cheap guys getting 10 points than spending up 76 or 66 or 56, hoping that you get to 10, because I'd be way more confident in kickers or any of those receivers to do that and save the price while I'm doing that as well.
Yeah, I almost wrote down as my fade just Denver's running game. That was literally my fade, was Denver's running game.
But again, if Jaleel does miss, then that just makes it a 2-man run game, and that makes me a little more intrigued by it.
Right.
But that just is the same thought process for everybody as well. And so if that means that a bad Javonte Williams is going to be 35+% owned, I'm not touching that again.
Yeah, I think I'd go Audric. I think I'd be more comfortable with that side of it. Let's switch over, though, because we do have another rookie running back on the other side of the game that we've been waiting on. Gus Edwards. We're going to talk about the running game first because we just got through that on the other side. But it's Gus Edwards, Kamani Vidal. We do have Hassan Haskins, but Hassan Haskins, I don't believe, has even touched the ball.
He's had 1 snap in 2 straight games and no touches since his fumble. He's basically just a non-factor once again, which is a good thing because he's not a very good running back. But with these two, I had a smile on my face when we started the show just because we had a conversation off the air with the last guys in for the afternoon slate, and I was saying that I wanted to ride with Kamani Vidal and ex-receiver as an option because Kamani was trending up in snaps.
Right.
And then lo and behold, he gets the first couple of snaps, and I was about to text you. I was like, hey, he's in the first couple. And I was like, I'm going to wait until he actually starts doing things. And then it just never worked out. And so I was like, oh, they just didn't play him. And then I looked at the snaps prepping for the show. This man was on the field 67% of the time.
Yeah.
And had 3 rushing attempts. What is that? What is that?
Tampa Bay was just beating the piss out of him, and he just didn't get it.
Even with that, it's just like, okay, well, you're trailing, and you're the only pass-catching back. Okay, you had 3 targets. And it's just like, I don't get the usage by him. He's a really good running back. He's the all-time leading rusher for Troy. Led the nation last year in all-purpose yards, and they're just not using him. And I thought after the Week 14 against the number 1 rush defense in Kansas City, or number 1 at least against running backs in terms of fantasy points, having 8 carries and doing 4 yards a carry with those, okay, you're going to keep on trending up, and it just maybe it's a bad game script, I don't know, but the snap counts were very evident, being a 67-27 split for the two, and then obviously about 15% of that, they just had no running backs in there.
Right.
But, he's priced up, but because of the consecutive poor games, I don't know how many people are going to be on him, but they're a home favorite. And his only touchdown this year came against the very Broncos on his very first touch in the NFL.
Yes.
So if you want any kind of trends or narratives or anything of that nature, him being cheaper than Gus Edwards is what really intrigues me about this. But Gus Edwards, 4 straight game, just being very, very inefficient. Obviously, J.K. went down during the Baltimore game, but he had less than 1.5 yards a carry against Baltimore, but he punched a touchdown in. Mm-hmm. And then Atlanta had 4.3 points, and he had 9.6 against Kansas City because he punched a touchdown in, and then he just very inefficient. One reception, the entire sample size of that. I'm not touching him at all at this price, and maybe I'm showing my cards with the fate of this slate, but it's Gus Edwards. Unless he punches one in, and even if he does, he might not even get you 10 points. That's how poorly he's been.
Yeah, 2 receptions on the whole year. Not going to be on him either. He was actually, we both wrote down him as a fade, but I think it was pretty self-explanatory on why we were fading him out of everybody else. Let's go ahead and grab some receivers. Excuse me. Ladd, McConkey, Quentin Johnston, Josh Palmer. We do have to talk about the Will Dissly situation because he has a Q tag next to his name. Prize Picks currently does not have any numbers for him, but they do have numbers on Stone Smart, so that is the fact that he is trending downwards and probably will not play. So we will most likely have to be talking about Stone Smart.
Yeah, usually
over him.
on short weeks with any kind of ligament injuries, or I believe it's an ankle injury for him, that you typically don't or shoulder, I'm sorry. But typically, regardless, on short slates, you don't expect people to be returning immediately.
Right.
And on top of that, Stone Smart actually did very, very well in his absence as the lone guy. This past week caught, I believe, 5 for 54 on his 6 targets. And again, he was one of our favorite 5 for 50 actually. But very solid output for being $2,600 on the main slate.
Yes.
The problem was Brenton Strange, who was 100 cheaper, had 11 receptions on 12 targets, and it's just like maybe we should have mixed it up a little bit. But it is what it is. He still produced on value, which was nice to see. And him being 4,200, if you're going to price up Audric for a possible Jalil injury, why aren't you pricing up Stone Smart for producing well when Will Dissly was not playing? And I just don't get it. Obviously, snaps for tight ends really this year have been all over the place because there's been injuries and what have you with Hayden Hurst. And then once he went down, Will Dissly started to trend up a little bit. But then now that he's hurt, Stone Smart in his first start, 67% of the snaps, and the next guy was 27%. That was Tucker Fisk, which has been your showdown call because of his, just being on the field in recent weeks. So, if we're trending Will Dissly to be out, he's just too cheap.
Yeah, fair. If Will Dissly does play, he's also too cheap at 4,600. I don't know why either of them weren't priced up. I was kind of on that same sentiment that they should have both probably been around 5,600 or something.
Exactly.
Josh Palmer, Quentin Johnson, Lad McConkey, top three receivers. They get basically all the run. Other players that get on the field are Darius Davis. He had 2 snaps last week. DJ Shark had 9 snaps, and then Laviska Shenault had 7. So these are the 3 guys that you're going to get the most out of on just like snap share wise. Lad McConkey's been the best. He's another guy like Cortland Sutton that we have to talk about because he is also getting about 9 targets a game. I believe he went out in this Tennessee game, and that's why he did not have. Yeah. That was that game. But yeah, so around 9 targets a game in the last 4, multiple times over 100 yards. He's been possibly he's one of the top 3 rookie wide receivers on production.
He's been the most consistent rookie wide receiver this year.
Yeah, for sure.
Malik Neighbors, obviously, he was a darling the first month.
Yeah.
But then since then has been nothing. Last couple of games, okay, he's starting to get back to 10 targets and producing with those targets, but Lad's been just straight up 10 to 14 every single week, since probably week 7, which is awesome to see. And then otherwise, the game that he went out, which you can't really hold against him, but he's been excellent. We loved the pick and him going to the Chargers, but we loved him more stylistically as a wide receiver too. And since they didn't have one, we were just wondering or weary about maybe his lack of production, especially in a run-heavy offense. Well, they're just still going to throw him the ball anyway, and he's going to convert on those opportunities. He's been very, very solid, and in his first game back from missing one game with a shoulder/knee injury, still 5 for 58 in the score, and obviously the game got out of hand, so they didn't want to, use him too much, but he still played 88% of the snaps, which I believe is a season high. So no concern from an injury perspective on him. If it came down to Cortland versus Ladd, I'm not saying that we're not going to play a line without one of those, but if it had to come down to one, do you feel better about one or the other?
Yeah, I'm on the Ladd side. He is my must play this week. And I believe your must play is on the other side, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think it's a debatable thing. They're $200 difference, and we'll talk about it when we get to our expected game scripts, and then of course our must plays and stuff. But Ladd's just been so good and consistently the guy that is getting the targets. He has one of the highest target shares of any team, any player in the league because they don't throw the ball that often. Looking at his numbers, like it just kind of goes with it. But I think he's my favorite play this week for this team.
Gotcha. So. Yeah, and again, if it came down to you have to fade one quarterback or one of the receivers, I'd rather play both receivers and fade one quarterback than vice versa. But I was just curious for those that are just in the boat of, man, they're both basically priced the same. I got to choose one, or I'm choosing between one or the other for the captain spot. Right. So that's and again, we'll get to that when we do our first looks and stuff like that as well.
All right, so Quentin Johnston and then Josh Palmer, both guys have been 75%ers. They're better when Ladd's not in the game. Otherwise, they kind of run wind sprints, and it is what it is. Josh Palmer, if you just look at his numbers, out there, 75% had 3 targets last week.
Yeah, he kind of reverted back to just being a non-factor from a fantasy perspective. He's running routes and doing cardio.
He's there.
He's in there, but he just isn't getting the ball. He has 1 touchdown, and it's unfortunate, but obviously the Chargers are starting to pass a little bit more. But even in a negative game or a positive game script, at least for the passing perspective, them still not getting him the ball, even in 3 wide receiver sets, is concerning. Quentin Johnston, they are trying as hard as they can to make him work out, and he's been bad, but he's got 8 touchdowns, so I guess that doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I mean, let's see. I'll actually pull up the red zone stats real quick just to see, because I wonder. The highest red zone snaps. Yeah, so Quentin actually has by far the highest of any player. Ladd's second, but in the last 4 weeks, Ladd only has one red zone target to Quentin's 5. So that kind of tells me what they're trying to get out of him, basically.
Yeah, I mean, they're just trying to get what they can out of him. He's a deep ball threat that, a lot of times he isn't catching it, but, when he is, like, it's working out. Grade-wise, he's like 61st out of 97 wide receivers according to PFF, which is awful for a young first-round pick that's healthy. But at the same time, when you catch touchdowns, what are you going to do? Back-to-back games with the touchdown. But the fact that he's priced up to 8,400 just makes my stomach hurt beyond imagination. He's a weird fit because if you do play him at 84, you have to fade one to possibly even two of the guys up top.
$1,000
which is
cheaper than Ladd.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So, again, it's just the construction perspective. I understand he's scoring touchdowns and what have you, and he's the go-to red zone guy. But spending 84 forces you to do other things that I probably am not comfortable enough with doing on
Fair
this
enough.
slate.
Let's hear your game script for this game.
Yeah, for this game, I expect a really close game, but the Chargers pulling it out 23-20. They're going to respond following a pretty bad defeat against the Bucs. It mainly comes down to the Chargers are, for the most part, competitive and beating good teams when they do, and then Denver, really all of their wins take nothing away from the excellent season that they've had, blowing everybody's expectations out of the water, but the only quality wins they have are not really there. They're just against below 500 teams. Once again, another game last week where they're trailing by 3 and about to be by 10 against Indy, and then Jonathan Taylor drops the ball, and then A.D. Mitchell throwing pick sixes, and then there's an avalanche, and all of a sudden, they blew them out. Well, no, like they were behind, they weren't playing well. Same thing with Cleveland being at home. You gave up 500 yards to Jameis until Jameis did what Jameis does and throw pick sixes and stuff like that. So it's hard to have faith with this team, especially compared to the Chargers. So I am going to call for a sweep. I don't know if I said the score already, but 23-20 is what I predicted.
Yeah, I have it 24-17, so we're probably at the same ballpark. I just have it touchdown game. First game was 23-16,
yep.
So kind of similar. I think the Chargers get the win. Denver, just like you said, they're beating bad teams. Their wins this year: Indy, Cleveland, the Raiders twice, Atlanta, who's been playing bad. That was during their down time. Carolina, New Orleans, the Jets, and then Tampa Bay was their only above 500 win. And that was in week 3.
Yeah. And then one thing I also did want to point out from a playoff perspective.
Yeah.
Cincinnati Bengals, they're on their miracle run to try to make it as a 7th seed. One of these two teams has to lose out for them to make it. There is a viable path. On top of that, having the Colts and Miami losing one as well. But one of these two has to lose out. But Cincinnati plays Denver next week. And on top of that, Denver plays Kansas City the following week. Whereas the Chargers, they get to go on the road against the Patriots, who are fighting for a top 3 pick, and the Raiders, who are fighting for a top 3 pick. So tell me the path of least resistance on that. If I'm a Bengals fan or a Bengals supporter, I'm definitely rooting against Denver in this one because that path is more viable. But that is worth noting as well as we're getting closer and closer to the playoff.
Yeah, absolutely. When you're looking at the slate, I did write down that it's going to be key things on the slate are quarterback versus quarterback, picking one if you're going to pick a side. Wide receiver 1 versus wide receiver 1, picking a side between Cortland Sutton and Ladd McConkey. And then the 6,600 to 7,600 running backs, if you do want to play one, that whole range, you have to figure out what you want to do in that range. I think that's big. Which Denver cheap receiver you have to play, because we're going to play one of them. And then there's not really any good cheap plays. Like 4,000 is like, or no, I guess 3,000 where Troy Franklin is the lowest you really are comfortable going. Everything else after that is a dart throw.
Well, I don't necessarily agree that there's no good cheap plays because there's paths for all of these guys. There's not any confident cheap plays that I would say.
Fair.
Because all of these Denver receivers, I would not be shocked if any of them turn their 5 targets into 8 points and just crush value. But the problem is, which one's going to do it? Because all of them are down there, and it's just flipping a coin or spinning a wheel on which one's actually going to work out. I was on the right side of the Marvin Mims thing, but we've also been on the wrong side of Devon Vele when Troy Franklin goes off against Denver. So, again, it's really what I will say is that it's going to be easy to be over the field because the ownership's going to be spread on all of them. So if we are going to do 3 builds, I'm not sure if we will, but if we do multiple of those builds, I think we should be doing those receivers because you can get overweight to the Troy Franklins and the Lil Jordan Humphreys and the Devon Valeys of the world because all of them will be probably below 20% owned.
Right. Well, let's get into building. Let's hear your first look because I think we're going to have a very similar idea on first look.
So my first look, and this is kind of cash buildy, but I want to start off with...
wait. What did I say? I'm sorry. We should probably tell everybody who our must plays are. Our fades and everything.
I mean, we kind of alluded to it, but you said you were on the Ladd side. I'm on the Cortland side.
Right.
Again, I would rather play both if I could.
Fair.
But both
Yeah.
of them have been as safe as can be. It's just kind of the game script. If the Chargers are playing from ahead versus Denver playing from behind, obviously the last time these two teams played, Cortland had the better game, so I went with that side. But I don't fault you at all. And Ladd is probably going to be in 2/3 to all my lines if I play him as well.
And then for our fades, we both picked Gus Edwards. The other fade for you was Quentin Johnston.
And it's purely a price thing because, again, if you play him, you have to fade at least one, but maybe even two of the guys above them, referring to the two quarterbacks and those two wide receiver ones. And because of the lack of confident cheap options, again, how I mentioned that I just can't do that with that price. If he was 7,000 like he was a couple weeks ago, yeah, he's in the pool as the last guy in, sure.
Yeah.
But not at 84. I can't do that.
Yeah. And then contrarian tournament plays, I went with Vele because I picked my favorite of the cheap Denver receivers. I think that, he's just the guy that I am most confident with. RotoWire has him as one of the best values. That made me feel better, at least, about my idea before I looked at it. So,
I really like Vele. He's been consistently the wide receiver 2 in terms of snaps, and he's $4,000. So I don't mind that at all. And on top of that, having a 1-target, 0-catch game, I think less people will be on him than what his price warrants.
I hope so.
I think he should be the best play, but I feel like people will kind of be scared off a little bit from the last performance or two. My tournament play, once again, I'm going to do it based on the facts of the matter and the trends, and it's Kamani Vidal at 6,800 just because I know at 68 it's very uncomfortable. His first 2 or 3 games without J.K. Dobbins, he hasn't done anything from a fantasy perspective, but every single game his snaps have trended up, and he's the only pass catcher, once again, like I said. So maybe if they're not down 23 points to Tampa, it's a more positive game script for him to where he'll get more than 10 touches. But if I'm picking him or Gus Edwards, I'm going Kamani all the way, and I think the ownership is just going to be way lower just because of the lack of output so far.
Right, for sure. All right, now let's build some lines.
All right. So once again, up top, I want to plug them all in. So I'm going to say Cortland Sutton is my captain, and then I'm going to put both quarterbacks with Ladd, and then I got uncomfortable amount of left. But my cheap guy is going to be Lil Jordan Humphrey. He is the highest value on RotoWire, and he has three times in his last 5 games, can't talk, that he had at least 3 targets. So last 2 games, no. But previous he has, and his snaps, he's consistently getting over 20% of snaps. So I'm riding with that. Last guy in, pick a kicker. That's kind of what I'm saying. I'm going to Rob Dicker, the kicker, because he is a very solid projection. And on top of that, if you're talking from a prize picks perspective, it's a goblin for him to score 2 field goals, which I always like when the trends are betting towards that way.
Right. Do you want to see my first look? You ready?
Same shit.
Different way.
Yeah.
Same 6. I'm going to go Ladd over Cortland, and I'm going to have $100 left over, and Cam had $0 left over. That's pretty much how cash looks. I mean, it is what it is. I think we should build a line without a quarterback and go ahead and figure out which receivers.
Which quarterback are you less comfortable with?
Guess Justin.
Justin?
I guess. Okay. I don't know. Where are you at? Do you have a lean?
So less comfortable being Justin. I probably side with that as well. Yeah. In the last game, Justin had the better game, but Bo Nix had the 2 touchdowns and Justin only had the 1. So he outscored him from a fantasy perspective. But I think it's just how are these points going to come?
Right.
Is my concern. With my score, it being 2 touchdowns, he's got to score both. And last time we played him, there was like 1-yard rushing touchdowns by Javonte, even though he finishes with negative yards. And they're punching one with Michael Burton and shit. And it's just really hard to predict when it's lower scoring games on both of them.
Yeah, that was awful.
Yeah, I guess I'll go Bo Nix for the upside and the lack of injury.
Yeah,
but
fair.
It's not like I have a confident lean in that. Okay. But also, for what it's worth, I feel more comfortable stacking him than Justin Herbert. So if that's a tiebreaker, I guess that's why I feel the way I do.
That's why I didn't. That's actually why I picked the other side. I did think about Stone Smart being an option though at 4,200 because if you were like, well, I'd rather play Stone Smart and Ladd than one of the cheaper guys down there because we're gonna keep Ladd in this and Portland
throw both
in
of
both
those
of the
guys
lines.
in
Yeah,
and see what our remainder is because it'll probably be pretty healthy.
54.
Well, also Stone Smart.
Oh, and Stone.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I definitely want if Will Dissly is ruled out, he's probably going to go in 2 out of 3 lines if we're doing a three lineup build.
Right.
Just because he's just way too cheap for his upside.
We could play Kamani and then put in kicker. We could. I don't really like.
That's organically the best way to go, unless you wanted another really cheap receiver.
But it doesn't.
Denver.
But it's like, I would leave a ton of money on the board if I was gonna not pick Kamani here. Basically, Will Lutz, or you could be like, well, I think Vele is going to be the guy. Leave $1,200.
Sure.
If not, you can go with the kicker. You did pick the Denver side, so yeah, I don't hate this. It looks nice.
So with both of us kind of being slightly under, I picked the exact, or I picked just over the spread. You picked just under the spread. With you going the under, do you think either defense is viable? And if so, do you have a lean?
I think both defenses are actually viable, but I would. Freaking Denver scores touchdowns. It's annoying, but I guess I'm gonna side with the Chargers defense.
Yeah. My problem is that I would pick the Denver defense, but it's against how I think the game will go.
Exactly.
Because they are the number 1 overall defense in fantasy football this year. They score pick sixes. Obviously, last week they did and won people money or won leagues and stuff. But back-to-back games with 20 points, and they gave up 500 passing yards and 32 points, and they still hit over 20.
Yeah.
And again, when we did the showdown against the Saints, that was our captain. And lo and behold, they scored 20 points. Back in week 7, I think.
There it is.
Yeah, 20 points. So Cody Barden was him that day.
Yeah, he was.
But,
he was everywhere.
Yeah, I mean that's why I lean that way. But if I'm leaning that way, then that's against kind of the nature of the beast. But at the same time, weird shit happens on slates like this. So maybe that's worth it to where they were optimal in a game that had a total of 80 points.
Yes. If you are gonna play Denver's defense here, this is a line that I think makes a lot of sense with it because you do get, you get Cortland plus Bo. Maybe that's like you're hoping for 2 touchdowns, I guess. And then you're thinking the other side is going to be throwing the ball a good amount. So you're hitting all those other notes. I think that makes a lot of sense. It's tough to, I'm not picking Denver to win, of course, but I know that Denver's defense is just doing the right things right now.
It's always tough when you pick somebody to win and it's really easier to build for the other team.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I feel about this slate. But it is a slate to leave salary on the table because there are a lot of options in the mid-tier range. And honestly, I don't know if a single guy between 7,500 and 6,000 is a better option than either kicker or either defense.
Right.
That's just because none of them have the consistency. So if you just as the last man in, you can afford Kamani, and you're just like, nah, I'm going to go with the kicker. You leave 1,800 remainder. Nobody's going to have that line. And that's how you get very, very unique with these kinds of showdowns that, again, it's a raw point slate.
If I did want to go with like a Justin Herbert build, you could leave some money, but I would go, if I wanted to build heavily on one side, I think a 4-2 could work, something like this. Not playing, of course, Bo Nix in this way, so you get the correlation with Justin plus three pass catchers, because that's what Kamani is. He's a pass catcher. He's gonna, if he is on the field, he should be running routes. He should be catching the ball.
And I actually don't know who would be a more popular captain between Justin Herbert and Ladd, because typically when you have more remainder, you're more different. But in this build, I think more people would flock towards Ladd being the captain more so than Justin. And so being only 100 but less, I think would be more in this specific build.
Well, my problem with it is like we're talking about this slate is like somewhat difficult, somewhat not. But it's like, okay, if I'm not paying that much for these guys. Like 10,000, 9,800 are really cheap options, truly. So I guess truly, I don't know if I think Ladd would be more popular captain because you're not getting the quarterback that's 10,800, 11,000, you know? So maybe you can save money in that way. So I'm a little skeptical I'm really uncomfortable with like where ownership is going to be on this slate, but I do think I have a pretty good idea of how I want to build every time. I'm probably going to play one lineup, and I'm just going to play the lineup we made, and because we were both on the same idea. It wasn't we had the same 6. It's so I'm pretty comfortable with that build, and that could be our cash lineup. And if we want to build like some other tournament lineups, I'll play those for less money. But that lineup is going to be my lineup for more money.
Yeah,
basically.
no, I totally agree. I always love when we're not even talking and we have the same exact 6. That's always a good sign. But one guy we haven't even mentioned that I do want to point out one more time is Tucker Fisk, being $600 if and when Will Dissly is out. He's had 5 straight games with the target, and 4 of those he caught a pass. He's only $600. And so if you believe in him more than a little Jordan Humphrey or Darius Davis that are, for some reason, getting value on RotoWire or something of that nature, or whatever projection sites you see, he's going to be on the field 25 to 35% of the time, and he might catch a pass.
Shoot, 25, 35. I think he's on the field like 60% of the time.
Well, the last 5 games, it's kind of all over the place. So he's got 36, 26, 43, 35, and then last week it was 27. Obviously in a negative game script, especially for somebody like him who's more so on the field for his blocking. So if they're playing from ahead, then he'll get more to the 43% that you're referring to. But he's worth mentioning just because he has the consistency, at least on the target front. In recent weeks, whereas Lil Jordan Humphrey or Darius Davis are projecting well, but guess what? They haven't done squat in the last couple of weeks. Again, I sided with Humphrey because of the fact that he had 3 straight games with at least 3 targets before. Yeah. But maybe he just trends more towards that was a weird week or slates and stuff like that.
Darius Davis has rushing upside though, which is kind of cool. But only 1 attempt in 3 out of the 5 games. Like I'm with you. It's neither of them are comfortable. If you want to play Fisk and think he gets 2 targets instead of 1 target, you're
the main thing is you can get overweight to all these guys if you do play multiple lines. I can't give you, if you put a knife to my throat, which guy I'm going to confidently give you that'll return and be the last guy in, because I don't know. Fair. But at the same time, if you're playing multiple lines, I would suggest being overweight to multiple of these guys and then just manipulating the captain on those last builds, or making some remainder decisions instead of a kicker going Vele or a Stone Smart or something of that nature, just to get different. But all these guys down here are viable if you want, because it is a raw point slate, and I think if you got 5 of the top 8 options, you're going to be very, very well on the right side of the money on this slate.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get to our Prize picks. I will go first. My pick is going to be Cortland Sutton at 5 receptions. I'm going to take the over on him. I would pick Ladd, but his is actually a whole reception higher, so I think both of these guys have been good. Cortland Sutton's averaging 9 targets a game for the last 5 games. 5 receptions is less than 60%. I'm pretty comfortable, getting on that side of the game. So that's where I'm going with mine. Hopefully it'll hit. Did we hit last week? Just wondering. Off the top of my head, I can't remember.
I don't think I did, because last week was the weird San Francisco game, and I think I picked Debo's fantasy points, and he had all the opportunity. When you get 9 opportunities or 10 opportunities like he did, and you don't get 10 fantasy points, it's your fault. And so he dropped a wide open 30-yard slant for a touchdown.
He scored.
What are you gonna do? I can't catch the ball for him. I wish I had the 4.4 speed to do so, because I would have scored. But I'm also a guy on the couch that can't really say much based on my athleticism. So.
I had Puka scoring a touchdown, and nobody scored a touchdown in that game. So
not a single freaking person.
He did have the best game out of everybody, though. What is? Let me see. Where's rushing yards?
Yeah, my prop is it's a vibe play again, second straight week. But Kamani Vidal being 27 rushing yards is too cheap. If it's a positive game script where you think the Chargers will be from ahead, he's trending more and more in terms of snap share and opportunity because he's the better running back. I can't guarantee he's going to score a touchdown, but if they're playing from ahead the whole time, it's going to be really hard for him to not hit 28 rushing yards if he does have 8 to 10 opportunities. Again, 2 weeks ago when he had a positive game script, he had 8 rushes and he had 34 rushing yards. Right. But he's also had multiple plays. I've watched multiple games recently for the Chargers. He's had multiple receptions brought back due to penalty. I count at least 3 on top of my head. So he's just needs more opportunities is all I'm saying. But if you don't like that, Stone Smart right now being, I think, at 32 receiving yards is really nice if you are confident that Will Dissly is not going to play. But there's different platforms that are projecting different things. Or 36 is
36 and a half now.
Not bad because he got 5 for
he's had 2 games for 50 in the last 3. Exactly. Or in the last 2, yeah.
So Not bad if you're going to consider that. We were hitting a lot of Will Dissly low yardage props in recent weeks, and we're doing well with those. But RotoWire is projecting Will Dissly in, but props are projecting him out. So there's not a confident lean right now. So right now I would stay away just because of that very fact. But right now, for what it's worth, it's cheap. But when Will Dissly does get ruled out, that prop's going to come down, and then they're going to juice it about 5, 6, 7 yards. So you got to get it now, but it is a risk play, just like a Kamani Vidal rushing yard play.
Absolutely. But yeah, so that's the Thursday night slate. That's our Denver versus the Chargers game. We really appreciate y'all hanging out with us. If you are still hanging out with us at this point in the game, in the show, week 16, we have a couple more weeks left before playoffs start and Christmas and all those fun things. So hopefully we can make some money so we can get some stocking stuffers and whatnot. But yeah, really excited.
We're closing to the end of the regular season. It's been a blast being able to cover. We got 2 more regular season live streams left. The week 18, both of us will be out of town respectively, so we won't do a stream, but that's probably a good thing because there's going to be so many people resting and having to pick through that. That's going to even take more time and effort to where, you know what, I don't know if we'll end up playing lines, but if we do, we will keep y'all posted with them. But no live stream that Sunday, but there will be this Sunday, there will be the following Sunday, and a lot of playoff implications and yardage bonuses and all that stuff are really in factor. One worthy of mentioning, Mike Evans is trying to hit his 1,000-yard streak, and he's got to average like 90 yards to do it. So they're going to try to get him that for the narrative thing and bonus and what have you. So all those kinds of things, it's going to be a whole lot of fun. Bowl Pick'em is underway. Another game tonight as of recording. There's I forgot the game.
Memphis and West
Virginia. Yeah. So basically there's games every single day the rest of the next few weeks. So
super exciting.
Whole lot of fun. First round of playoffs this week. This is peak football season.
This is and everybody gets work off and you get to enjoy it. You know, probably get New Year's Eve off and there's six bowl games that day, and you know, football constantly, that's how we like to see it. All the way through January and then into February for the Super Bowl. So we appreciate y'all hanging out with us, and we'll see y'all next time.